Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. Hey everybody, thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. This is Kyle, and this is episode number 74, and it is the second part of a two-part interview with Jeff Bell. Jeff is a health advocate, and he's a radio host, and he's an author, and he is on the board of the National OCD Foundation. He also founded a nonprofit called the A2A Alliance, which you will find out more about in this episode. He also has a really cool voice that you will be familiar with by the end of this episode. If you did not listen to the first part of this interview, it is episode 73, and I recommend that you go back and listen. Jeff introduces himself, and he tells a lot about OCD, which is really interesting, and really cool the way he has dealt with it in his life, and I think we can learn a lot from him. In this episode right now, you're going to hear how Jeff has used his adversity to create a platform for advocacy for himself and for lots of other people. There is a call out in this episode, and we want all of you to get involved with one of the programs that Jeff has going on. And it's really easy. I think you just call in, and it takes like 30 seconds, and you just leave an encouraging message for other people that are dealing with challenges. And that's what this podcast, The Two Disabled Dudes, is all about. And so I think that hopefully our listeners have some encouraging things to say. So listen for that in this episode. Take action and enjoy this interview, this second part of this interview with Jeff Bell.
Jeff, I want to go back kind of maybe a slightly lighthearted moment. In the beginning, you started talking about the modern day use of the term OCD. And yes. You talk about, today it's just there's a different vocabulary around it. So I am curious because you mentioned the boyfriend-girlfriend example. I feel like I say it somewhat regularly. Oh, my OCD is kicking in, or my OCD is taking over. Obviously, I don't think I have, I certainly don't have the same diagnosis you have, and I'm willing to bet that those words, when they come out of my mouth, are just uneducated. So I'm curious, when people say that or kind of refer to their own version of OCD, do you find that offensive? Or does that, I would assume at the very least, it waters down the reality of it or the significance of the disorder?
Boy, you guys ask great questions. So here's the answer to that. I think like a lot of people early on, I just wanted to scream and say, you guys don't understand how debilitating this is. But the reality is this. I have come to see those references as a gift because they open up a dialogue. Mm-hmm. And when I hear somebody say that, and in the appropriate circumstances, if it's somebody in my world that I can have a conversation with, I try to do something like this. Hey, I'm really glad you used that term because I find that more and more these days, there is a misunderstanding about this disorder that I have, OCD. And, I would love to, if you don't mind, I'd love to share with you a little bit about why OCD is something much more than a synonym for anal retentive or fastidious. Because here's the thing. So let me ask you something. When you talk about, feeling a little OCD about keeping your car clean, have you, just out of curiosity, have you ever been late to work because your car wasn't clean? Oh God, yeah, no. Have you ever felt like you wouldn't be able to get through the rest of the day if you couldn't go clean the car? I mean, was it so overwhelming to you that if you didn't go to the drive-through car wash and put some wax on the car, that you might not make it until dinner tonight? And then this blank look on their face. No. Okay. Well, no, I just put that out there because I kind of wanted to help you understand that for people who have clinical OCD, it's incredibly debilitating and gets in the way of their day. And it becomes so overwhelming that they feel it crushing them to the point where they're not sure that they can even survive the rest of the day. They're like, oh, okay, well, maybe that's something a little different. No, so I mean, I have come to find, first of all, that I say things all the time that I'm sure, and this is a guy that makes, that is built a nonprofit around various adversities. The more I learn, the more I know I don't know anything about 90% of these adversities. Sure. I knew nothing about FA until we met, Sean. And so it's a reminder to me that people aren't trying to, provoke with that. It literally has become part of our vernacular. So I do not hold it against you. I do not hold it against anybody who uses the term in a way that I feel perhaps can water down the term. It's an opportunity for me to hopefully educate in a sensitive kind of way.
Beautiful. That's brilliant. That's such an opportunity to help people understand. Yeah. And that's incredible.
Yeah, it doesn't do anyone any good if you get offended and defensive. But taking the stance of education and seeing it as an opportunity to connect with somebody, I think that's really productive.
Yeah.
That's certainly been a personal lesson learned for me. Kyle can attest, and Jeff, I'll just tell you and our listeners, there was a day or many years where I would get deeply offended when somebody assumed I was drunk, and I would, start a little miniature war. But the more you deal with it and the more you discuss it and talk with other people, you realize all those opportunities is a chance to educate somebody that has no idea. It's not that they're being mean or insensitive. It's that they have no idea. All they know is drunk. So, of course, they're going to assume it's drunkenness. So I love that you point that out. And I can tell you, I'll probably never say my OCD again. I've just eliminated that phrase from my vocabulary.
Well, then this has been a success all the way around. Let me share one more piece about all of this before we move on from that. I think one of the reasons that OCD is so fascinating to most people, and it is, I hear it all the time, this is fascinating, they'll say, is because I think most people can relate to it. The reality is that everyone, and I do not believe, let me be really clear about this, I do not believe everybody has a touch of OCD. It doesn't work that way. OCD is, in my opinion, a pre-wired wiring issue we come into the world with. But I think people can relate to the core notion that uncertainty is uncomfortable. And because it's uncomfortable, we tend to do things to remove the uncertainty. For years and years, when I give my talks around the country, I tend to open up the talk for a non-OCD audience by asking them a question. I'll say, how many of you in the past 6 months have left your house and wondered to yourself, did I close the garage door? Then I'll say, if you don't have a garage door, replace that question with, did I unplug the curling iron? Did I turn off the oven? Did I turn off the coffee maker? Whatever. And almost to a person, when people are being honest, they'll raise their hands. And those who aren't raising their hands are lying. I know that for a fact. We all do that. And then the next question is, okay, so how many of you at some point in that period have actually gone back and double-checked? Again, almost to a person, people will cop to the fact that they've gone back and checked. The difference is they were able to go back and see something and feel better about it and move on with their day. They understood the root discomfort. But for those of us with OCD, once is never enough. In fact, that's the name of a great book on OCD. Once is never enough, because it just keeps going around, the dog chasing its tail, I would go back and check my garage door, feel better that it was closed, drive off, and think to myself, wait a minute, did I check my garage door or Mary's garage next door? And then I have to go back and check it again. I mean, I could make 6 trips back there. So, I mean, that's part of the root of this disorder being very relatable for people, and then the nuance being the degree to which it becomes debilitating and overwhelming.
Right. So, Jeff, you touched on something at the beginning when you were explaining who you were and what you stand for. And something struck me. I think that Sean and I, hold high as well. The fact that adversity gives us power. We can either see it, depending on how we perceive it and how we react to it, right? We can see it as something that's dragging us down, or something that's giving us power and the ability to connect with others and build up our lives. Yeah. And I just love that. Adversity has such a negative connotation, I feel like, to most people. And when you were talking about it, it's like, no, that's what gives me power. That's what gives us all power if we choose to see it that way.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's been, and I'd love to tell you, wow, that just snapped overnight. No, it took all these years to figure it out. And I think if I can, in answering that, I'd like to sort of start with the connection to the OCD world, because it all comes together. And it's this: the treatment for OCD is something called exposure therapy. And can I take just a quick minute and tell you about that? Because if anybody listening, I want them to know that there is treatment for this disorder.
Please.
Yeah.
Okay. So the treatment for OCD is something called exposure response prevention treatment. I call it torture therapy. But basically, the notion is this. You have to learn to sit with anxiety. I refer to it as the uncertainty paradox, that the only way to effectively navigate uncertainty is to embrace uncertainty. It's very Zen-like, but it's true. And here's the analogy that I really think pulls it together. And this is from a wonderful book called Freeing Your Child from OCD by Dr. Tamara Chansky. She uses this analogy. When we were kids, we got in a cold swimming pool. And the water was cold, and our brains yelled at us, cold, 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 get out, get out, get out. But we were kids. We stayed in the water, and the water warmed up. Well, did the water really warm up? No. What happened?
You got used to it.
We got used to it.
Your mind changed, yeah.
So the clinical psychologists use fancy terms like acclimation and habituation, but those are just fancy ways of saying we got used to it. So the analogy is this: if you think about anxiety, and this is true for any form of anxiety, I'm not even talking about clinical anxiety, just anxiety in your life about anything. When you keep running from that anxiety, you never get a chance to get used to it. You keep getting out of the pool before you acclimate to the discomfort of anxiety. So OCD treatment is about systematically learning to sit with anxiety, to expose yourself to these various triggers with the help of a trained therapist, and prevent yourself from doing that traditional response, which is the compulsion. And so that process taught me a lot about life. The idea of staying with the discomfort of challenge, staying with the discomfort of adversity, and acclimating to it, and then doing something constructive despite it. So I published a memoir years ago called Rewind, Replay, Repeat, and I kind of went public with my story. And what happened, guys, was that I found that the more I started sharing my story, the more empowered I felt. Yeah. And I know that you guys understand this because it's what you're doing too. And that's when I became fascinated by this whole notion that we help ourselves by helping others. And I came to discover that it was more than just some namby-pamby, kumbaya kind of thing. There's a whole body of science that's being developed around this. It's sometimes called positive psychology. And there are think tanks at Harvard and Stanford and Berkeley and all these amazing institutions that are looking at not only the psychological, but the physiological benefits of altruism, of service, of sense of purpose, of empathy, And they're finding that we're sort of wired that way. We're wired to want to help other people. And when we find a way to take what we've been through and do something constructive with it, we get a great sense of meaning and purpose. And guys, I'm going to venture to guess that you've got some tough days with your challenges. Let me ask you, does it help you to think that there's something constructive you're doing with what life has dealt you?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that truly really gets us through, right? Everybody wants purpose and to know that their life is meaningful. And when we can use our disabilities to that end, holy cow, like it totally changes the game around 180 degrees.
Yep. That's the magic. And that's the message that, we hope to achieve through A2A, which is just this simple notion that we help ourselves by helping others. And the idea is not to wait until we're better with whatever we're dealing with to start helping other people. It's turning it on its head and saying, by helping other people, it's going to fuel our resiliency.
Yes, I love that.
So since you mentioned it, tell us, what is A2A, and maybe give us a little background on that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking. So A2A is a nonprofit organization. We've been around for about 8 years now, and we exist to promote the power of turning some form of life challenge into some form of service to other people with that particular challenge. And so there are all kinds of amazing projects out there that encourage service. Our particular niche is that we encourage service to the same community that we are a part of in terms of that adversity. So we have cancer survivors reaching out to other cancer survivors. Sean, we found you initially because you have a great story of reaching out to the FA community and reaching out through your podcast with Kyle and all these other wonderful things that you're doing to other people going through adversity. And we try to showcase that by telling stories. So we have built a network of about 100 advocates that support one another through what we call the A2A Alliance, and we're always building that out. But beyond that, we tell stories through a podcast on radio.com and through a feature called A2A Spotlight that we send out through the CBS network. And we just basically profile people and let their stories speak for themselves. Look what this individual has done. And we're finding that those stories inspire other people to step into advocacy. And then the third thing that we do is we're really trying to showcase the research around all this. And it's just, I'm fascinated by the science that is sort of catching up with the experiential discovery that service is a very powerful motivator.
Talk to us a little bit about, I think it's very similar, but I read a phrase that you coined that is greater good motivation. Talk to us a little bit about that, maybe what it means.
Thank you for asking. Yeah. So greater good motivation really ties back to my experience with OCD and dealing with anxiety and this whole uncertainty paradox, if you will. So it's this. Those of us with OCD, one of the hallmarks of this challenge is that our brains are wired in a very bifurcated way. We tend to see the world as either very good or very bad, very right, very wrong, very white, very black. And what we do with OCD is we tend to catastrophize outcomes of things. And so if I don't do this, this horrible thing is going to happen. If I do this, things are going to be great. And so the world becomes very defined by what appear to be good and bad choices. And what happens is if you define good and bad around anxiety and say that the good choice is the choice that relieves anxiety, the bad choice is the choice that makes you sit with anxiety, you will tend to do that thing that relieves anxiety over and over again. So let me just bring it back to the hand washing. My hands feel like they're very dirty. I might be contaminated. My OCD tells me that I have two choices: scrub my hands or don't scrub my hands. The scrubbing seems to be a quote-unquote good choice because it relieves anxiety. not doing anything seems to be a bad choice because it requires me to sit with my anxiety. What I learned in the School of Hard Knocks was to replace my decision-making in this way. I learned to acknowledge the perceived benefit of reducing anxiety. That is that quote-unquote good choice. I learned that that feels very real, and I need to acknowledge it and leave it on the table. But what I learned was I could trump a perceived good choice by making a greater good choice. And for me, greater good is simply a choice that does one of two things. It either empowers somebody else or it empowers me. So that is, I'm of service to somebody else, or I am doing something that enhances my own sense of purpose. I say purpose and service are the primary greater good motivators. So if an individual out there listening right now is having a really bad day and they're thinking to themselves, if I go out, horrible things are going to happen. I'm better off just sticking around at home today because I'm no good to anybody and the horrible things are going to happen. And just that bad state of mind. I'm going to throw that out there as a general anxiety sort of thing. It might seem like the quote-unquote good thing to do is to stay home, and the bad thing would be to risk going out there. But if we could reframe that decision and say, what's the greater good here? And use purpose and service and say, in what ways can I serve somebody else by going out of my house today? Oh, well, my mom really would like me to come by and visit or restock the refrigerator. Okay, there's some service. And what if I was able to get out today and, took a nice jog, for example? Well, that sort of gives me a sense of purpose as somebody who takes my health seriously, whatever the case might be. That service and purpose combination, a greater good choice, will trump the good choice every time if we give ourselves the opportunity. I just threw out a lot of stuff there. I hope that made some sense, but that's the concept of greater good motivation.
I love it. And reading about it, and hearing about it, it totally makes sense for sure. Sorry, Kyle.
Well, I was just gonna say, you touched on it that it doesn't logically make sense, right? Because I feel like we're all wired to look out for ourselves first.
Yes.
But basically, what you're saying is something that's good for everyone else is going to be the best thing for us, and that doesn't make sense. But if we, realize the concept and sort of meditate on it whenever we can, maybe that helps us to choose the greater good more often.
Absolutely. And I love that you said meditate there, because I've become a real fan of mindfulness practice. Now, let me just put out there as a disclaimer, I suck at it. but I'm a big fan of it. I feel like I've got this monkey mind all the time that I really can't get mindful of things. But what you touched on there, Kyle, I think is so critical, because if we are able to just hit the pause button for a second and say, what's the greater good here? It is so empowering. There's this great diagram that was sort of popularized by Stephen Covey in his book, 7 Habits, that I believe actually comes from Viktor Frankl. And it's this, there are two boxes, stimulus and response. And there's an arrow in between those two boxes that says freedom to choose. And I think of that all the time, because we are free to choose our response to any stimulus. Okay, you guys didn't choose to have FA. I didn't choose to have OCD. We can choose, though, what we do with that, right? That is our choice. No one can take that away from us. That's that little arrow between stimulus and response. And it's only when we pause and ask ourselves, how am I going to respond to this, that we're able to kind of wedge in something constructive in between automatically going, okay, A, therefore B, in some kind of dysfunctional pattern.
Yep. Jeff, you just described the entire reason for this podcast. So thank you for that.
We're going to, if we ever get to a point where this podcast comes to an end, we'll take that soundbite and you'll be our series finale. Yep.
Awesome.
You guys should have known that, you put on a guy that's used to talking in front of a microphone. He's just never going to shut up. So
this is
I've been
fantastic.
rambling for a long time here.
No, we're so incredibly grateful for the insight. One thing I mentioned to Kyle before we started, and maybe I should have confessed this on the front side. We've been doing the podcast now for about just over 2 years, and we've had a lot of fun, a lot of good insight. But honestly, I'm completely on the outside when it comes to mental health issues. I'm not very familiar with them. I don't interact with people that have clinical issues, mentally speaking. So I really value the conversation today and learning a little bit about maybe what life is, on the surface, what life can be like for somebody dealing with social anxieties.
I agree. Same. I will reinforce that.
So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the wonderful things about A2A that I love most is the diversity of our adversities, if you will. When we first started this campaign, I think 4 of the 5 of us who were behind it initially were coming out of the mental health world. And we thought, should this be a mental health campaign? Should we, focus on the mental health? And then we started realizing, because we had a number of friends, we had met very early on a young man with ALS who's just remarkable. And so much of what he was saying about what fuels him was so resonant with what we were dealing with and finding in the mental health world. And we realized the strongest thing we can do to really drive home the point that we help ourselves by helping others is to show just how universal the principle is. It's not unique to a physical disability. It's not unique to a mental disability. It's not unique to any particular life challenge. It is a universal principle. And so what I love more than anything is finding new stories to help share, new challenges I didn't even know existed out there, and showing how this universal nature of service and purpose and resilience, how those principles are there for anyone dealing with any kind of health or life challenge.
That's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Love it.
Can't argue with you on that one. So, Jeff, tell us where folks can find you and the work that you're doing. Talk to us a little bit about, obviously you mentioned the A2A Alliance and the Spotlight. Where do people connect with you and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So we have our main website is a2alliance.org, and our storytelling platform, which we've launched more recently, is a2astories.org. And the sites talk to each other, so you can go back and forth between them. But we're always loving to hear from people. So if your listeners want to check us out and want to tell us about people that they know in their worlds who might make good stories for us to share, we'd love to hear from them. Anyone who wants to reach out to me directly about OCD can do so through my personal website, which is just jeffbellonline.com. There's an email link there. Always happy to answer any questions I can. And yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful to you guys. And Sean, when you first broached the notion of being on the podcast, I was just really tickled because you obviously saw some parallels to the work that we were doing with A2A and what you and Kyle are doing through your podcast and your work. And that's what it's all about. It's just, let's all network and let's all share our stories.
Absolutely. I'm starting to feel guilty, Jeff. We promised we wouldn't keep you on the phone for too long, and here we are, like 45 minutes into it or something.
I don't want to shut up. It's not your fault.
No. Okay. Well, as long as you're not deeply offended or mad at us.
No.
I do have one more question that I'm curious about. I just noticed on your website recently this new idea, Project Hope. Is that something you want to talk about, or is it too soon?
No, it's great. I love that you asked about it. Project Hope Exchange. This is really cool. And this is sort of the baby that hasn't gotten any attention yet. It's actually not even all that new. It just hasn't been able to get the attention it deserves yet. This is a project that we do with another nonprofit called Life Best Inside, based out of New York, which is a kindness awareness program. And it's a wonderful organization as well, Life Best Inside. And the two of us created this. And what it is an online repository of hope. And we bring it back to one simple little mechanism, which is this: 30-second audio messages of hope. And guys, I hope you'll both take 30 seconds to record a message for me. That would mean a lot. You go to the website, and there's an online interface where you can do it digitally there, or there's a phone number that you can call and leave a recorded message. But the idea is you've got 30 seconds to tell somebody else with your particular challenge why they should feel great hope based on what you in your life have experienced. You know, I'm Jeff. I had OCD so bad I could barely leave the house, but with the help of loved ones and friends, I got help. I got stronger. I'm able to carry on a quote-unquote normal life today, and I want you to know that there is hope for you as well. That's it. That is it, plain and simple. So we've collected these hundreds and hundreds of messages from all around the world, which is really cool. I don't know. I've lost track of how many countries are involved now. And we collect those messages and put them in buckets. So there are, you can go to the website, and I'm somebody dealing with OCD. I can key in OCD, and I can find all these messages from people who want to talk to me and tell me why I should be hopeful. But even more than that, guys, the real secret here is it is as much for the person leaving the message as it is for the person receiving the message. You can do it anonymously. If there's somebody listening right now that goes, I'm hearing these guys talk about advocacy, I'm hearing them do things, I'd like to do it, I'm not sure I'm ready to share my story publicly, they can call and just say, hey, this is JB or whatever, and anonymously get a taste of what it's like to try to give somebody else hope. That's Project Hope Exchange.
I was on that particular page a couple days ago and couldn't stop reading. I'm like, are you kidding me? This is a thing? Oh,
that's so cool.
Like, you archive all these different testimonies, if you will, and then a keyword search, and I get a boost of encouragement. That's so cool.
Well, I think we need a couple of FA messages of hope on that website ASAP.
If you're not careful, you're definitely going to get Kyle and I, and of course, you probably just got like 20 of our listeners at least. So, friends, help us out. We totally believe in the idea, and I'm a huge fan of A2A Alliance and the network, and Jeff, I appreciate you. So if there's anything I can do to encourage our listeners to be a part of Project Hope Exchange, I want to take that opportunity. And of course, we'll link all of that in our show notes. So Jeff's website, where you can also find his books and some of the stuff that he's done. But of course, the A2A Alliance and everything that they're after too. Kyle, I feel like I cut you off again. Was there something you were going to add in?
No. I was just going to say, Jeff, it's been really, really powerful. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, guys. And please let me know what we can do through A2A to spread the word about what you're doing, because I can't think of better examples of the A2A concept than you two.
All right, everybody, thank you for tuning in. Isn't Jeff Bell amazing? I had such a great time in our conversation, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. We would like you to visit our website where you can find all the links to everything Jeff talked about. Specifically, we want you to participate in Project Hope Exchange. I personally just left my message of hope on Project Hope Exchange just a few minutes ago. So, Sean, it's your turn. And listeners, dear listeners, it is your turn as well. Please take action and give hope to others, because the concept behind Project Hope is that we get hope if we give it. So it's a really cool thing, and check it out. And thank you for listening. We will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast.
Find us online at twodisableddudes.com, and please subscribe on the iTunes. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And special thanks to our audio producer, Jake Tompkins.
Until next time, keep living with urgency.